Pause on Point. Today we're joined by a special guest, the lovely Necro13. How you doing?
I am ready. I'm as ready as I've ever been.
Very ready.
There were no technical problems before this.
Welcome to the show, Necro. Today we're going to be covering Under the Scope and his video, The Problem with Problematic Media, Monogatari. Very interesting subject that I think we should all be very well versed in, knowing our backgrounds.
Yeah, I did a little research on him, but I think that'll become apparent as we view this, I'm sure.
So without any further delays, let's jump right into it.
I love Monogatari. Bold statement from someone who's devoted over 70 minutes of video content to covering the series, I know.
70 minutes of video content. Oh, it's the series that you like and you want to cover it. I don't particularly see any problem with that. I will say, right off the bat, very flashy. Editing's very sharp. Seems to be pretty good.
Oh, yeah. He spent more than 30 minutes in Sony Premiere. Well, no, not Adobe Premiere. What's the Sony? Sony is Sony Vegas.
Yeah.
Sony Premiere.
They're always changing companies over there. They don't know which one it is.
Yeah. It's Adobe Vegas. But I'm impressed. I reckon it definitely has the appearance of looking sharp, so I'll give them credit for that. It's really good. Let's keep going.
It constantly builds on its characters, asking you to reevaluate your understanding of them. Its use of narration and perspective to shape the story reinforces the different ways we perceive the world around us and project the images of ourselves we want others to see. It's one of the most visually distinct series out there and exhibits some of the strongest creative talent in the industry. I love Monogatari. And I also hate it. In my quest to cover every Monogatari arc, I hit a bit of a snag with Shinobu Time. Unsure how to collect my conflicted thoughts into a cogent idea, the conversation with myself went something like this. Hey, your last Monogatari video did big numbers and brought a lot of new eyes to the channel. Maybe you should give them more Monogats content. Great idea, me! I got it. Why don't I talk about what I hate about it? Yeah! Wait, no. Yes, Shinobu Time encapsulates both what I love and hate about the franchise across its 4 episodes. The second episode represents the series' diverse visual range, with its experimental aesthetic, telling Shinobu's backstory via a continuous scroll across a near-static tapestry, illustrated entirely by Taiki Kono. Barely animated, it's a testament to Monogatari's inventiveness and the stylistic freedom it allows its staff. Sure,
Alright. I don't know if any of us have much experience with Monogatari, but I guess he's correct.
Oh no, I have experience with Monogatari and with Akiyuki Shimbo as well. Now, like even early in his career, he's always had a very unique how would you say it? Way of directing and unique way of presenting visuals.
A unique directorial style, maybe.
There you go. Yeah, you're smarter than me at this moment.
At this moment.
I've grown, evolved. Yeah, I haven't watched Monogatari. I do know of Monogatari. It's always looked like a pretty good show, I guess. I know a lot of people are really into it. But yeah, at the moment, yeah, he's just talking about. This is all set up, right? He's setting up the argument that he's
somehow. I already know exactly what his problem is going to be with this arc.
Alright.
the series' abstract shaft style garners most of the attention for how out there it is. But beyond that, these varied aesthetics demonstrate the depth of Monogatari's visual language. The arc's final episode, meanwhile, illustrates the series' terrific character writing, how it plays with our existing knowledge of characters to constantly make us re-examine what we thought we knew with each new layer of context. Its revelations don't just change the story going forward, but reframe how we look back at what came before, making it this continuously rewarding narrative. Shinobu Time concludes with a powerful emotional climax, adding some much-needed depth to Mayui's character, while also raising some interesting questions about the purpose of existence that will surely play a large role in the arcs to come. I could easily make a video on that topic alone, but I feel disingenuous leaving it at that because there's also episodes 1 and 3. It's Araragi at his absolute worst, as 3 children essentially fight over him, complete with physical advances and his sexual innuendo. Mayui and Araragi's relationship has always been one of the series' worst aspects to me. I feel like this doesn't require too much elaboration. His behavior is abhorrent, with his constant harassment of an elementary school girl. Not to mention...
I don't know. Maybe it does.
Oh, we're stepping off into the problematic territory now, I see, right?
No, somebody dropped.
We lost Ellie. Oh no.
Well, we'll continue without him.
Yeah,
Rip.
He's probably still recording his.
Yeah, there we go. Anyways,
he'll be back.
So yeah, no, I take it he's just not used to Nisio's writing.
Well, yeah. Here's Ellie. Ellie's
Hey.
back. Welcome back. Yep. So, yeah, I feel like probably would require a bit more, because I understand that the guy is a lolicon, I guess would be the best way to describe the character. He just likes the little girls. So I don't know. Perhaps that would
I don't know
to
with,
elaborate on.
With Araragi, it always seemed like he was more like a general purpose pervert, if that makes sense. A lot of his humor tends to revolve around how he approaches the girls around him.
Yeah, because I don't think he specifically. Yeah, because there are other characters in the show that he does have those interactions
Well,
with.
he
It's not
has
just
like
the
His
lolis.
sisters.
he has a saying of something like, "I would marry. I love Sensei-Kurohara. I would marry this. I would adore her and be in the company of her." Something like all of them.
Right.
And he says this to Hachikuchi, if I remember correctly,
Right.
as a means
So,
to
yeah.
seduce her.
So yeah. I think that's the thing, because right now, because he said that it shouldn't need to be elaborated on, but I think it possibly does, because is he talking about just the fact that he's a pervert, or is he talking about specifically the lolly stuff? Which I think he does clarify in a minute, but at this point it's just kind of like, as someone that's not familiar with the work, it's better to take the time to explain things in case someone that's watching is not familiar with the work, right? Because someone could have stumbled upon this video not knowing what Monogatari is. It's good to perhaps have a slight primer into the character. and
Just
what
saw
the
a cute
motivations
girl on the cover, on the thumbnail.
are. Alright, let's continue.
It's always played for comedic relief. It makes him that much more despicable, and with the story told
That
from
is
his
pretty funny.
perspective, the framing of it is deeply uncomfortable. But his horrible nature is intentional, you might say. Even if that's the case, it ultimately undermines the narrative when we're supposed to feel something towards him and their relationship. The emotional punch of the arc's finale has a hollow ring to it.
Pause.
Alright.
That's a very subjective statement.
Yeah, and I when he says stuff like it's abhorrent, it's despicable, it's this, I want to know why. And I know that sounds like a really weird question to ask, but because he's talking about it in these absolutist terms, in these terms of this is this, right? I would like him to spend the time going, right, this is why I think this. I think this is abhorrent because of this, right?
Yeah.
I feel like
I can kind of get what he's inferring in this, and
yeah, I
just-
get what he's inferring, but I just feel like it needs that little bit more of a explainer, just a little bit more.
The thing that kind of gets me is that there's fan service across all of the arcs, regardless of character, and it only. Earlier he said there was an intense emotional or climax. Now he's like, oh well, it's hollow because all the other fan service stuff that happened prior. Because that's basically what his problem is. There's lolly fan service in it, played off for comedy, which isn't an uncommon thing in Japanese media, especially in the anime sphere.
Well, yeah, the perverted character is a trope. It's very common. The idea of the perverted character or perverted things happening. And that's why I need that prime, right? I need that. Okay, you think that this is abhorrent. Why do you think it's abhorrent? What is it your culture? Is it personal history? Is it this? Like I feel like I need that kind of
You need the context behind
little
it.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I need the context as to why he thinks the way he does about this particular subject. And it seems weird when it's something like, oh yeah, well of course someone would have a problem with lolly fan service, because the obvious reasons. But when he's making those kinds of authoritative statements, I feel like it should be pushed that you should clarify those statements with, this is why I think this. Is it gives people the context as to why you're making the argument that you're making. But I guess it might just be me.
No, I mean, it makes sense because he's saying, well, like you said, he's already saying this is abhorrent. And this character, you're supposed to feel something for this character, but now it's just out the window. But it's like, but why? Like, obviously, if no one else feels that way, then...
And plenty of people disagree because, Hatsuguchi's goodbye, for instance, is really...
Everybody was talking about that arc after it aired. Like,
yeah.
I'm not like if you're even remotely connected to the Monogatari fan base, like everybody was talking about how emotionally impactful it was.
And I like this in Japanese media in general. This contrast where you can have the most wackiest and silliest of things immediately followed up by a super serious scene. And
like toothbrush orgasms.
Well, Hatsuguchi is a good example. Hatsuguchi's goodbye is a very good example because it's immediately before it's a very silly thing, but afterwards, and when it gets all emotional, everything, in my view, before it gets contextualized as putting off this conversation, like being silly, making jokes when your father on the deathbed is going to die. You make one last joke about the car that he never could. He always worked on, but never got the right tire right or something. Hey, Dad, did you know that right tire? I figured out it was just a small bolt. Ha 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 ha! And then he laughs, and then he fades away. You feel the emotion of that scene. And that's what I feel of this fan service most of the time when it's followed by a serious scene. Otherwise, it's just fun fan service.
It's just So I guess the point here is that we want context. We need to understand why why Scope is thinking the way that he is, that we can try and figure out what's going on. So yeah, let's continue.
When it's built on a dynamic I can't buy into. It all comes back to my eternal frustration with Monogatari, and what makes the series nearly impossible for me to give a blind recommendation to. When it's on, it exhibits some of the best writing and visual innovation in the medium. When it's off, it plays into anime's worst tropes and offers some truly groan-inducing content. For me, it's the dictionary definition of a problematic fave. But that also makes it the perfect launching pad for a discussion that tends to turn highly divisive. How do we engage with problematic media? And what sort of impact can it have?
Okay, so before he goes into it, let's see if we can answer his question. How do we engage with problematic media, guys?
By not watching it. It's simple. You don't watch something that you don't like. I mean, from my own standpoint, but I guess if you're wanting to watch what he's watching, like Monogatari, I mean, you're watching anime, and literally almost anything is possible. I mean,
things are only problematic from a very personal perspective if somebody doesn't like a way a certain topic is presented, or they think justice isn't given to a certain topic. But I think most people don't think about that when they're watching something. They're not thinking, oh, how socially accepted is the message of this? Because, they tend to be very immersed in something.
Yeah, I can see that. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Joker or not, but that's...
Oh yeah, no, I just saw it just last week.
It's a great movie, and
I haven't seen it yet. I need to get around.
I'm not going to try to not spoil it for you, but it's it's exactly that. People would say that Joker is problematic because it deals with mental health issues, because the Joker has mental health issues the entire movie. It deals with how he had self-defense when he was on the subway, which is pretty much what kickstarts every event going forward. But people could say, well, this is like, you've seen the news go on about this. It's problematic because there might be incels going to these movies and shooting up the place. There might be some security concerns, but I mean, none of that actually happens. But we need to talk about mental health at some point, and media is the one way that we have.
Yeah, and as somebody who has his own experience with mental health in the United States, I actually think that they actually had a pretty fair portrayal of a lot of things and a lot of the problems that people in the system of it tend to experience. So it's like a lot of the problematic elements that people are finding is just like, oh, this is coming from outside of the media itself. It's a very meta type of thing.
Yeah, so I think how we engage with problematic media, I have to agree with Necro. I think that if you have a problem with something, your choices are basically don't engage with it at all. Just don't, if you know that something is going to upset you or make you uncomfortable or whatever, you shouldn't feel pressured or pushed into it just because it's, let's say, popular or someone is really recommending it to you or whatever, right? If you are not into, let's say, the rape in Goblin Slayer, to use that as a recent example, right? If you get triggered, I guess, for lack of a better term, by rape just completely turns you off, completely, then just you should probably avoid it, or at the very least not watch that particular episode or something, right? Like there are choices on a personal level available to people that don't involve censoring it for everyone else. There's a level of personal responsibility I think a lot of people are lacking in terms of this kind of discussion, where they feel the need of, oh, this upsets me, therefore no one else should enjoy it, or something along those lines. So, yeah, it's an interesting question, and I'm interested to see where Scope kind of goes with it. So, unless Ellie's got his own.
Yeah, Ellie was. I think I interrupted Ellie at some point.
Well, it really depends on what you mean by problematic. In what sense? You mean problematic as in this media is portraying, like Lolly said, something in a way that you don't like, or is it maybe it portrays a view which is wildly unrealistic and harkens back to some dangerous ideas in the past? I mean, don't take dangerous idea too personal or get triggered by it.
Yeah.
In a soft sense, of course. I like to bring up the slime isekai. Forget the name, but everybody should.
That time I got reincarnated as a slime.
Yeah, that one. That show really is really unashamed of showing stuff without really realizing some of the consequences of it. And what I the most mean by it is that it really enslaves the slime character Rimuru, really enslaves everybody he comes across, because everybody gets bound to him by his awesome magic powers and granted a name from God himself, and forever they toil under his merciful rule. And of course every country that as much as hears of slime is immediately enraptured and wants to enhance and improve their own culture with whatever slime is doing. Oh, slime! Oh, great slime! Your great presence enlightens us all.
All hail the slime.
Yeah. And that is in a sense, problematic because you have a character that basically enslaves everybody and whose culture is superior to everybody else's in the entire world. And the problem then, of course, is that Rimuru is Japanese and still holds on to his Japanese culture. Does that mean that Japanese culture is inherently better than everybody else's culture? Even the ones that Rimuru self doesn't know?
It's a matter of perspective, I guess, a little bit. But
Out of
yeah.
curiosity, he hasn't defined what he means by problematic yet, has he?
I don't think. Yeah, I think we're possibly going. We might get to that. I don't actually remember, but because I watched this yesterday.
I watched this like a week ago, so it's like...
Yeah, we'll have to continue to find out. But yeah, let's see where he goes and see how he answers the question.
A huge sticking point for people. Just the P word might cause a few to tune out. Some argue it doesn't have an impact, that people are naturally able to separate fiction from reality, and those who don't will read their own viewpoint into anything. For that latter group, it's indicative of a larger problem already there, they say. But this argument fails to consider that this isn't about delineating media from reality. Fiction is often a reflection of real-world experiences. It's one of the most powerful platforms available to examine ways of thinking and challenge systems. However, the reverse is true too. It can just as easily be used to perpetuate harmful ideas and attitudes. Essentially, it's a blank slate. Media can comment on as much or as little as it wants, as responsibly as it wants, all depending on how it's used. To say that problematic media is incapable of influencing people in negative ways, even subtly, ignores how we create and engage with art entirely. Fiction is...
Okay, so this entire argument around problematic media assumes that people have no other cultural input throughout, I would just say, the day in which they've watched something. Or have no prior... It kind of assumes that people themselves are blank slates if they can be that easily influenced.
He's getting a little bit into normalization theory, right? The idea of, well, if media portrays a certain thing enough, it begins to become normalized within the culture.
Yeah, it's the Tipper Gore logic.
Yeah, I'm not convinced by this argument. And the reason I'm not convinced is actually because the perspective of media influence has been backed by science, right? We have had how many studies on violent video games over the years?
Violent media in general.
Violent
the
media
US
in
since
general.
like the 60s, 70s.
Right. We've had all of these studies, and the studies have varied. They've gone back and forth between yes, it has influence, yes, it doesn't have influence, no, yes, no, right? Now we've gotten to the point, I believe, the last time I looked into it, or the last study that I saw a synopsis for, essentially came to the conclusion that media, in the case, like in the specific context of violent video games, right, it has a temporary influence on behavior that quickly dissipates immediately after the fact. So you'll be playing Call of Duty, you might get a bit mad, you might rage a little bit because you're getting owned by some 12-year-old, right? But then you'll put the controller
master,
down.
XXX gamer, XXX.
XXX Pussy Destroyer 298867. You'll put the controller down, you'll walk away, you'll go make yourself some tea, and you won't be any different. Like the anger and the adrenaline is only temporarily affected, right?
Mhm.
You're not going to be an angrier person for the rest of your life because you played a violent video game, right? Typically, when somebody is influenced in an extreme manner by a form of media, it's usually an outlier case of somebody who already has some form of problem, either mentally or, psychologically, right? Or has some form of other behavioral problem that is catering into that,
Yeah,
right?
they would have to be conditioned into that. Like, you don't just... I mean, I don't know. That's a good example. You don't play Ninja Gaiden 2 and then be like, I mean, I really want to be a ninja. I really want to be a ninja and do that and think that, that's normal. But if someone was like, well, this is how everything works and they're conditioned for years and years, then they probably will believe that it works that way. I mean, it's an awful example, but
yeah. So I don't buy into normalization theory. I can agree with the idea that it's possible that it would subtly, you could have some influence, right? I can agree with that idea. However, I don't believe that influence is enough to cause some form of major societal shift, as he seems to be implying, right? Like, I don't
Not
believe
even
that...
the long-term thing within
No.
the individual, because how many influences do you encounter upon yourself throughout the day?
I mean, you're seeing advertising constantly.
Yeah.
Advertising is a big thing, right? Like the idea of influencing that way. So, yeah, I don't buy into that argument, and I believe I lean more onto the side of that. Okay, yeah, it might influence, but so what? Right? I don't. Yeah.
what does he think?
I'm
Like,
trying to
what is
think.
he trying to like in this video? Because I'm still kind of gathering everything together here, but it sounds like he's trying to imply that because Monogatari has these themes or fan service that he just does not agree with, that somehow will translate into the real world, that people will be like this.
Well, you mentioned that because he makes an interesting point where he says, because he's talking about how art is a reflection of reality, and it's an age-old debate, right? Does art imitate life, or does life imitate art, right? And I think that there's a bit of both that happens. I think that art can both imitate life, and life can imitate art. I think both. It's not a. Oh, excuse me. It's not a mutually exclusive type of deal with that. However, I feel like he's using that kind of in a wrong way, I guess. Where I think that, yeah, it's true that this art is a reflection of reality and it's showcasing things that are real. Like, let's say, for instance, someone's desire to, want to fuck a lolly, right? let's use that as an example.
Oh,
Like-
I mean, I watched Monogatari once, and I immediately went out and molested a ghost. Like,
That's why your name is Lolly Dominatrix, because you watched Monogatari once and you
it
adopted.
just I was gone.
Yeah, it's forever corrupted. But this is what I'm getting at, right? Is I feel like, yeah, the art is imitating life. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that the life is going to imitate the art, right? It's not necessarily connected in that sense. I'm trying to like compartmentalize my thoughts here a little bit on the fly.
Let's if we want to say life is imitating art, what are lollies? What are lollies imitating in life?
Well,
I mean, that
let's-
answer's obvious, isn't it?
No.
well, no. That's a good question, because what is a lolly, right?
Yeah.
A lolly is a cartoon exaggeration of something, right? It's not a realistic depiction or representation of something. It is something that has been taken from reality and has been contorted and twisted into something completely different, right? Which is why, and I agree with a lot of people on this, that lolicon is not technically child porn, right? Because in my eyes, a lolly is not a child; it's a lolly, because they're not.
Yeah.
It's been so contorted and twisted from what
Stylized.
and stylized, exactly.
I mean,
that's what it was.
let me put it this way: if are you going to like go to like a Renaissance painting or something that might depict a child or something, and be like, "Oh, that's a lolly"? No, you should
No,
say
you're not.
it depicts a child.
Child.
Most people, I think, would, even those who tend to be weeaboo, as it were, would say that, because there is a significant difference in how the community, or how people who are into this stuff tend to classify things.
Yeah.
Well, question me, I'm an expert.
I happen to be an expert on the topic, hence the name.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
the reason why I ask this is because if you say, life, art, which is which, you got a nice reflection in the image right now. Good choice, really, for the topic.
The pause. You could say the pause was on point.
Hey.
Oh. I'll let you go. Sorry.
Yeah. But I'm really confused on what, because lollies aren't children.
Hmm.
Araragi could be, his actions you could say are teenage-ish, but none of the lollies are children, act like children,
Hmm.
so they're not imitating children. So what are they?
No. Exactly, and that's what I mean when I say that lolicon is, or lollies are not. It's not child porn or whatever, right? Because it's not technically a child. I don't view it as a child. I view it as a lolly. I view it as what it is, not what it's trying to represent. If that makes any sense.
Well, my point is even that lollies aren't even representing children,
Hmm.
because yeah, that's what I am.
We need what you're
I'd
saying. What you're
say
saying.
it's
What you're
representing
saying.
a very idealized version of it, because there's a lot of aspects that make up.
I
an
think
actual
what you're
human being.
I think what Ellie is trying to say is we should have got Jekko on the show,
Yeah.
so he could educate us plebs on the scientific data.
Well,
We love you, Jekko. Don't worry. We're just joking around.
Then we can get in a 5-hour Twitter argument after the
Yeah,
fact.
get into a yeah. But no, I see where you're going, like, because it's become so stylized and distorted. It's not, you know, the idea of it representing a child is even in itself completely off the mark in that sense. I can agree with that.
yeah, and
I
that
think that could be correct.
and the follow-up point is then it basically undermines kind of the video itself, because it assumes that it's connect, because if the representation is something else, then of course the fan service
it's-
isn't about children, it's about something else, which means
it's
that
about lollies, yeah.
so that would mean that whatever fan service involves these characters, it has no analog
Connection
it has
to
no
real life,
analog
yeah.
in the real world.
Yeah, for this video to work, you have to be running under the assumption that the representation is that of something from reality, when it's most likely not.
I
It's
mean,
most likely it's more likely just a representation of anime tropes.
Even deeper than that, for this video to work, what he finds problematic would have to be something that everybody else can mutually agree on, because again, he still hasn't defined what he means by problematic.
well,
Mm.
just to for continue that analog bit. When I said all the stuff about slime, I'm not going to repeat it, but all of those things have a real analog, have an analog in the real world. Whether it's slavery, whether it's soul, Second World War,
Indented servitude, such and such.
such as Second World War, nationalistic Pan, Asia, Japanese Kingdom, Empire. Those are all analogs in the real world. Lollies don't have it, so any naughty desires don't have an outlet in the real world.
Yeah. All right. Let's keep going, and because he's moving into a transition again. His editing is very interesting, because you notice that he has those little slides pop up that are like pro, con,
Yeah.
transition.
Oh yeah, no, he's great at editing.
Yeah, the editing's really solid on this video, so which is why I mentioned before. Like, I think this is a good video, right?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I'll
made.
even clarify this. I actually, as an Anatuber, actually genuinely like a lot of the things he's done.
Yeah. So, and it's why this is a good video to talk about, and it's a good video to discuss, because it's way better than an anime myth.
Yeah, it's not just somebody
Like, we're actually
saying something
having
stupid. It's actually
Yeah.
somebody who's fairly intelligent trying to bring up a point, and
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we're having a very intelligent conversation about these points, right? We're not just
You're not pulling
just
a me.
we're not
I
just
know what you
dunking
mean.
on somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, let's continue.
Is a mirror through which we present an image of the
Not
world.
making confused
We can distort the
noises.
picture and lay a filter over it to create however many degrees of separation from reality we want. But when we create, we build on that original image of what we know in ways that speaks to our experiences, our understanding of people, and connection. Even purely escapist media is an idealized version of it. Of course, when you watch a TV show, you know what you're seeing isn't real, but it's a reflection of something that is, at some level, and it does affect.
Okay. Again, what about art that's reflection of other art?
Also, he keeps laying on the point that it does affect us, but he's not explaining how.
Well, I could say I could see not an effect as in the video game studies, because that really is real short term. It's not even necessarily a normalization. It's more of a partial adoption of another culture, because and even if you make it a little bit broader, say you work in accounting. You come into a culture that is number based and maybe strict and lots of official work and sign offs. And if somebody works in that environment for a while, that person would have a real difficult time working in construction, where the rules maybe not always followed. Oh, I found this, I'll use it, and oh, that's fine.
Improvising.
Yeah. So there's also two cultures where someone has been normalized into one culture and then finds another culture problematic. But this is work culture. But I think when watching media, you also adopt something of a similar culture, which isn't a culture where, of course, where you live, because that's way stronger just through social interactions and what do you say in the grocery store. It's all was way stronger than any thing you watch on TV on a computer screen.
Yeah, I can get with that, but
yeah. This entire thing is kind of approached from more of a philosophical angle by scope here. I'll just say scope, rather than something that can be objectively measured. And I think that's kind of what problems I tend to have with arguments about problematic media, because at their core, they are the same arguments that were made by the was it the Committee of Public Morals or something like that back in the 70s, 80s, when rap music was hitting the scene, and people were like, oh, these kids are going to be gangbanging on the street. Not that type of gangbang.
Yeah, it's the same thing, like the Tipper Gore kind of thing, where they said that the evil music.
Yeah. This channel's now been fucking deleted. But anyways, the kids are going to be like, selling drugs and like doing drive-bys because they heard NWA like once, and it's like they never were able to point to any falsifiable study that proved that it had a effect. So for me, like, I don't even really put that much thought into it. It's the same argument, just through a different lens.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Like, if you're gonna make the statement of, well, this affects you, point to the study that shows that this actually affects you in a significant society-changing way.
Yeah, just saying that it's problematic isn't really that helpful. And again, he's making this kind of like art reflecting reality type thing. It's like, yes, art does kind of reflect reality, and I feel like a lot of the time, people create this kind of problematic artwork because they cannot do these things in reality. Like, we've got Naruto on the screen here. Like, you can't Naruto run in real life. Well, you can, but not
to the extent that they can. I mean,
yeah, not yeah. But you can kind of go watch Naruto and get the same kind of feeling, right? The idea of, you know, this is what it's like and all this other kind of stuff, like the escapism aspect, right? So I feel like with a lot of these things, you know, like Lolicon and, you know, particularly, you know, all this, you know, porn is a very, very, very good example of this, right? There's a lot of genres of porn that would just not work in real life at all and shouldn't work in real life, right? for very obvious fucking reasons, but they exist. Why do they exist? Well, they exist because people want those experiences but know that they can't do it in real life, so they create a method to be able to experience it. So I think that the idea of, well, okay, so it's problematic, right? And it's a reflection of reality, okay? So? is the question. It's like,
Well,
okay.
this is slightly different because whether or not the nature of the problem, or how problematic it is, on the scope here says because it affects real life and therefore we should be cautious about bad influences that would teach you to do stuff in real life.
Yeah.
But it is another to recognize problematic elements and name them. But that doesn't mean that you think that it would have an effect in real life. Would just inform people that this idea that maybe a little packed up nicely and a little bit obscured is a bad idea. Don't be fooled by its pretty package.
Right.
Which is different from influencing real life.
Yeah. And the narrative of Monogatari even acknowledges that, because a lot of the humor involved with Araragi being a pervert is that
he gets his shit
it's
kicked
not
in,
right.
Yeah.
It's not right.
Yeah, he gets his shit kicked in.
It relies on the very aspect that you know that that's a bad thing, or you know that it's inappropriate, and that's why it's
and
funny.
There are often consequences to those actions shown within the show itself. I assume. But anyway, yeah, let's continue.
Affect us, not always in obvious ways. Sure, a lot of people don't engage with media critically, but that doesn't mean they're less likely to be shaped by it. If anything, that passive experience lends itself to an easier acceptance of the ideas it presents. If it goes unchallenged, who's going to give it a second thought? That is the crux of the matter.
You know,
man, there's a lot to unpack.
Well, luckily we covered it all already.
Yeah, we did, but I just wanted to kind of just like, he's saying, it's weird because it's like he's saying,
he says
not a lot.
He just said what I said, but then he says because it affects you in real life, where I didn't say that.
This is the mindset that leads people to write things where somebody does something bad, and then like somebody else is like, "Yeah, you shouldn't do that. Take that."
Yeah, that you have to beat people, or it's like the extra credits video. It's like you have to like beat the fact the Nazis were bad into people like with a stick. The Nazis were bad stick. You just have to
can't have
swing
new
that.
lines, otherwise people are going to replicate it in real life.
Yeah, because he makes that point. Like, if it's not challenged, you know, I think that one of the problems that a lot of these people that say that things are problematic have is that they assume that everyone doesn't already know that it's I think people know when they like, if like we're looking at like the Sword Art Online harassment thing right now, which is a very good example of this, because
It was basically
everyone,
rape.
everyone knows that this is bad.
Yeah.
You can like it's very clearly obvious that this is not okay, right? So I think that it's like the people that point out, bikini armor or boob plate armor is unrealistic, And I think there's the very famous 4chan meme of the guy that's just like, shut the fuck up, we already know this, so you're not smart for pointing this out, you know? Like, we already know rape is bad, or at least you should, and if you don't, then you've probably got mental problems, right? Like,
That's how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course,
So-
in this, he says people who don't engage media critically are more susceptible to his bad ideas. That's true. That's true. Like, if you don't recognize that all the slavery stuff in Slime is slavery, then just doing that is okay. It is a fine story element. Oh, what Shield Hero does, that's bad because it's a slave and a slave and a slave. Never mention that Naofumi basically treats it more of a partner than any. Naofumi treats Ratalia better than.
Naofumi basically saves the raccoon.
and Ratalia saves Naofumi. Basically, they have a better more equal relationship than any character in Slime has with Rimuru.
Yes, but none of these people that supposedly think critically about media talk about this, do they?
No, but of course, this sort of the line shot is being framed, being shown, Dutch angles, shadowy face. You can see it in the bottom part of the screen.
Yeah,
the face is
We
covered.
don't have a. Yeah.
The face is already covered in shadows. He's hunched over. This is clear. This is a bad guy doing something bad. You can't make it more clear. You can't make it more clear.
Yeah.
So
It's pretty in your face. So yeah, let's keep going and hopefully not pause in 2 seconds. It's hard because it's very dense what he's saying, right? There's a lot to kind of unpack, but yeah, let's continue.
Problematic media isn't a problem because of its content. It's when that content is ignored and accepted. Yes, nobody likes hearing someone finds a thing they love harmful. When we form close connections with media we love, we tend to personally attach ourselves to it, such that a critique of it is a critique of us. So the natural response is to get defensive, rationalize such content, or just ignore it entirely. And that's how it slips through the cracks. Take the treatment of female characters in so many harem anime. It's naive to think nobody is going to watch that and internalize such attitudes. Not when they self-insert as MC-kun negging a bunch of schoolgirls.
Pause. He's assuming that all people self-insert into media, and that he is saying it's naive to assume that, nobody's going to internalize anything. Well, why is it naive to assume this? Like, a lot of the thing with this video is that he either assumes that the audience already understands what problematic is, or whatever he's referencing, wherever he gets his viewpoint is something shared by everybody, or it's just made as back padding for everybody who already agrees with the message.
He's making the Mr. Cynical a good pal Reekfag mistake in that he's not like, well, I wouldn't say it's the same kind of thing, but it's the definitions problem, right? He hasn't actually, like, we're halfway through the video and he hasn't properly defined what he means by problematic, right? We don't know what he's actually trying to, like. Yeah, it's weird.
Well, show an example. That is all I'm asking, is you show an example so that we can see if your example applies and whether or not what you're saying
because he's talking about like how women are treated in these harem shows, right? And he's talking about how problematic it is. Would he say the same thing about the boys' love / bloody
yaoi? Yeah, would he say that? Mm-hmm.
Like, would he say the same thing about like the reverse, where it's the female being lusted over by the men?
Well,
right?
That's the thing, because in just a few seconds ago when he said that the problematic media isn't bad because of its content, it's bad when it's ignored and when it's accepted. And he kind of it's right when he cuts over to Goblin Slayer. And I said, people when they saw that scene knew inherently that this was some bad stuff that was happening. They didn't.
No one would shut the fuck up
Yeah.
about it for like weeks.
Yeah, and so there's people that are actively talking about what is good and what's bad, and then they take the scene as, oh well, this wasn't a good scene. It was just for X, Y, and Z. But the people that saw it were like, yeah, this is bad, and they said this is a setup for a story because we know that they're not.
It's world building.
Yeah, but the people aren't going to go out the next day and say, man, I really just want to go to a village and start taking all the women. That's kind of what he's like trying to set it up for.
He is making the assumption that people don't think about these things. Like, he's making the assumption that people don't recognize that, you know, if you're watching the Ichi. Like, I think if you're watching the Ichi Harem anime by now, right, you probably know what you're getting into. Right? You kind of like it's usually advertised on the box, right?
Mhm.
As to what you're getting into. I think, yeah, he's running under this assumption that people just ignore this stuff, right? Like, people don't like, even because the thing is people might not talk about it, but that's because it doesn't necessarily need to be talked about. People understand what they're watching. I don't like this idea that, you know, everyone's just stupid.
Yeah, well,
Right?
people can
I
self-police
think-
themselves, and that's what I don't think he knows, that people do that.
Yeah, and I get that, you know, there is the idea of, yeah, people are technically stupid, right? But I think people deserve, like, in terms of people I'm talking about, like, the general sense, like, I think people need to have a bit more credit in the respect that you can't just run under the assumption, oh, well, you know, everyone's just ignoring this, because you don't know that. You don't know that everyone's just ignoring this. For all he knows, people probably aren't ignoring this. They recognize that it's problematic, but they don't say anything because it doesn't fucking matter.
He's running under, it's kind of condescending, because he's saying, oh, well, everyone else doesn't think about this critically, only a few people think that. And, like, I don't believe that's the case. There's this, I forget where the hell I've seen it. There was this post somewhere that was something along the lines of, whenever you're sitting at a bus stop and you're seeing people walk by, and you think to yourself, all of these people walking by, they are thinking nothing in their heads. They're like ants. They're like zombies. Recognize that everybody in that crowd probably thinks the same thing as you're thinking right now.
Everybody is the main character in their own story, right? Like, everybody has their own, you know, story going on. It's not just
Everybody
NPC
thinks
meme,
about
NPC meme aside, right?
Well, I mean, that's what he believes, that, you know, he would be the type of person where if people hadn't already declared the NPC meme problematic, he'd probably agree with it.
Yeah.
I wanted to
so-
I wanted to bring up one point, because this issue of problematic media and it would affect you over long term also, of course, applies to your own culture's media, which I'm going to say America, because his English is pretty good.
Safe to assume.
He's probably American.
Mhm.
Either that or
Yeah.
Canadian, which means he gets a lot of bleed over from American media.
Yeah.
So
Probably.
you got a lot of shows with guns, and a lot of heroes with guns, and a lot of shooting for the good,
lot of ultra
a
violence
lot of
as well.
lot of blood, lot of killing, and by that argument, maybe it's true now, because if you think of it, a lot of shootings in America. But of course, the shootings aren't done in the name of good and honor and stopping the bad guy. Those shootings are done for different reasons, so it doesn't apply. Never mind. But
Here's the thing. So, for as violent as American media is, we share that media with the entire world. Now, think of the country that's just north of America. Would you describe it as violent? Surely, if most of the media they get is violent American media, they should be significantly more violent now than they are in the past, or they were in the past before
Yeah.
exposure to it.
Yeah, it's
and that is my point, really. That you can say, oh, look at this edgy harem shows and how demeans women and all that and that stuff. Maybe it's true. That's not really the point now.
Yeah.
If you compare it to the American show with all the guns and lots of killing, then you would, if you follow this logic, believe this train of thought, you would have to have an equivalent in America or other countries where a similar culture exists. And I don't think that
Yeah.
really exists in that way. Therefore, I don't think you can really make the same argument for Japanese media and whatever content that has.
Yeah, it's kind of like what makes this media like special in the way that it has to be viewed with this type of lens more so than your homeland's media. Like what is the why is it that this is so problematic and so terrible and it's going to cause people to do this, but then you look at the other side of the pond and you see all the violence, all the killing and stuff in American media, and to some extent also a lot of sexual content, even though it's not as, overt, right?
Different.
Still quite a lot of it. It's a different kind of sexual content, I guess. The argument just kind of falls apart when you start to actually analyze it like we're doing now.
Let not say that our arguments are so much better than the others are.
No. Yeah, I'm not trying to say that, but I'm just saying that like the idea of the problematic media affecting, right? Like,
I'm confident enough to say that my arguments are better.
I knew you were going to say that. But yeah, it's more so the idea of when you analyze this statement of stuff affecting real life, it starts to fall apart. But yeah, let's continue.
Not when we see these same behaviors in reality. When we normalize these views in media, we send the message that it's acceptable. The framing, of course, is essential too. Heavy content and problematic content are not the same thing. That's an important line to draw because it sometimes seems like people want to eliminate such content entirely. But these are important topics that need a dialogue. Media can be an invaluable forum for exploring controversial ideas that's connected to but separate from reality, so long as we don't lose sight of what makes it that way. I have no issue with media that engages with such content responsibly, giving it the weight it deserves. The issue lies in media framing destructive ideas in a positive light. But
does Monogatari show these destructive ideas in a positive light?
And what exactly does framing do to a person psychologically that makes them not accept it? Because he brought up Pat Labor too, and a lot of people might actually agree with the villain in that, or the antagonist in that movie. And if they were to ever do something or ever act upon those very high ideas, you can consider it destructive, regardless of how it's been framed.
Yeah.
Well, I can bring up my slime argument once again, because in that show, of course, everything that Rimuru does is shown in a positive light, in a positive framing, yada yada.
Yeah.
But I don't see people making countries, naming people and bounding them to their will and all that stuff. So
bonding their souls and all this other shit.
Yeah. And suddenly evolving into a more humanoid shape.
Yeah, and that's kind of the thing here, right? Like he's bringing up this idea of how it frames it matters, right? But does it? I mean, did Goblin Slayer frame its rape as being a positive thing? I don't think so. Yet people still.
I mean, if somebody what they needed a little fairy next to the Goblin Slayer who yells out in a squeaky little voice, "That's rape. Rape is bad."
Well, that's what I mean, right? They didn't frame even the Sword Art Online. We were just talking about the framing of that, like literally just before, right? How that was shot, the Dutch angles, the shadowy figure, the face, right? Like that was not framed in a positive light, and yet some people would still claim it to be problematic just because it exists within the media, which is something that he did touch on, like the idea that people are confusing heavy content with problematic content. But the issue we now have is you haven't defined either of these things properly in this video. You haven't defined, okay, what does problematic content actually mean? What does heavy content actually mean? And how do these two things not merge together, right? And that's the problem I currently have with his analysis here.
How does the framing even change this? Because again, going back to Monogatari, a lot of the humor relies on the assumption that the audience knows that what Araragi is doing is inappropriate or wrong. So it's not framed as being a positive thing. It's framed as being a funny thing. But being a funny thing is not the same as being a positive thing. Yeah, Airplane's funny, but we can all say that airplane crashes are not a positive thing.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's kind of what I'm getting at here. It's very, very annoying to me that he hasn't properly defined what he's talking about.
Yeah, and there's of course a difference in comedy and in unrealistic romantic relationships. Those are different. And harems don't exist in real life, aren't going to exist in real life.
Well, in some countries, harems.
Not in this idealized shape, time, but
in some based and red-pilled countries they exist.
but of course, slime, it shows some ideas in a positive light without any framing that it might be interpreted in a different way. And in those instances, you could say somebody could come in and point out that what the show, what slime does, isn't really a good thing or a good idea, but there isn't really anything to act on in slime. And I really believe that as soon as any harem show or any other thing show does something that has a real life analog, does have something that has an action that you could realistically do in the real world, anything that would be problematic in this sense would be very apparent that it would be a bad idea. If it was ambiguous whether or not to have to collect panties of the neighbor's little sister or whatever, I don't think that we're living in that world. So I don't think it's really it's not problematic in a sense of a real life consequence to have a show where
it's
some character...
rare enough over there that it makes the news. Like, if something makes the news like that, there's a good chance that it's not a usual occurrence.
Yep.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, and I was getting a little off topic, the crime rates in Japan, although there's obviously the dark figure and a lot of stuff doesn't get reported, but the observable crime rate in Japan is relatively low compared to most other countries. So it's very interesting how you would make this argument of, well, this is problematic, it affects real life, and then you look at the origin where it comes from, and the fact it's
you could
really
even say that sexual content is less harmful than gun content.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should do something about that.
All right. Let's see where he goes with this.
Doesn't mean our heroes should always do good and villains bad. Certainly not. But when the hero does something bad, and the show tells us it's good, there's the disconnect. This doesn't have to be some loathsome offense either. Often we're talking about...
Shit tell you it was ever good. He's never actually given an example that showed that it was good, just that it was humorous.
Again, he's not explaining why. So we're harkening back to the very beginning of this episode, right? I asked, okay, why is it problematic? I need you to explain to me why it's abhorrent, or why you find it problematic. Because if we don't have that context, then we're all the way this far in the video, and we don't get why you're going on about it.
Yeah.
And now this is going to be very interesting. This bit on Full Metal Alchemist, right?
I want to say one thing, and that is that you can. I think the author of this video also realized this though, but You can have a character, a good character, a main character, has to do something which is bad, and it's being framed or shown as good,
Yeah.
full lightning or whatever, but the audience understands it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
Well,
You
this
could-
it seems like it seems like under the scope here just takes everybody to not be very smart or receptive to what they're viewing on the screen. And so, like with Full Metal Alchemist, and this is just me reading forward, so it'll probably get debunked anyways. But it's gonna be like, well, you see what the Elric brothers do, and sometimes they make piss poor decisions, but like they don't ever say, "Hey, what they're doing is a good thing." But instead, when I can't remember if it was it's in Brotherhood when Al gets trapped by I forget the one little boy homunculus. I can't remember his name for the life of me, but he traps himself in there with him because Hohenheim is there.
Great.
And yeah,
What?
so Ed runs up and he says, "Why would you do that? Why would you trap him in there with that monster?" He said, "Well, this was Al's idea." And then you start to be like, "Oh, don't I feel like a jackass?" It's you as the viewer,
Yes.
and like you're interacting
Yeah.
with it, and then you understand it. Like, oh, I get it now. But that's how he kind of thinks, is like, oh, well, this character is problematic. This anime is problematic. And you're like, okay, well, what's problematic about it? We don't know. Oh, well, you should already know.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the
Now,
kind of
this-
mentality,
this
I think.
is I'm remembering this bit about Fullmetal Alchemist. This is a very interesting point he's about to make. So let's try and listen very carefully as to what he's about to say and respond to it.
About much subtler behaviors you might not think twice about. It could be as simple as a racial majority character advocating a position on injustice that fails to fully consider the perspective of the affected minority, such as Ed's conversation with Miles in Fullmetal Alchemist. I think Arakawa's take here is a well-intentioned one, but lacks a bit of nuance, and could promote this idea of colorblindness that, when viewed through a real-world lens, often defaults to cultural whitewashing. So FMA is cancelled, right? Because I said so? Of course not. For one, you may not agree with me at all. That's a valid discussion to have. And second, I specifically chose to use FMA as an example because it illustrates how nothing handles everything perfectly. And that's just fine. Canceling problematic
So
Okay. You know what? I was going to yell, but I'll let you.
no, you go first. You're the guest. You
I mean, well, my takes are very uninformed. And I oh my God. So, okay. I can't. Just go ahead.
okay. I'm. It's very interesting, like because now it's kind of going a bit off topic, right? Because of the idea of colorblindness and whitewashing and all this other stuff and whatnot.
Well, if we want to keep a little bit more on topic, we could stay on topic of the idea of.
Fuck staying on topic.
Yeah.
fuck the topic.
No, the idea of that the issue here is that good shows have content that is problematic, but that doesn't really detract from the whole work itself. And in that sense,
Yeah.
we agree with it.
Yeah, in that sense, yeah, I 100% agree with that, and I think that his point about, time to cancel Brotherhood, right? Because it has this one bit of dialogue that he
You
finds
can't
problematic.
cancel it. It's already over.
Yeah, I know, but this is what I'm saying, right? Is like the idea of canceling something or like stopping something because it has a problematic element to it. You know, no matter how small or big, right? I think we can all agree that that's really, really stupid. And it's weird because his thing that he's just shown as being an example of of a problematic thing in Fullmetal Alchemist because of this idea of colorblindness, like that turns into whitewashing or whatever, which I think we could probably get into a whole other fucking discussion about that. And as he mentioned before, people might not agree with him, and that's a valid discussion to have. So credit to him for that. But it's kind of like, so this element exists in Fullmetal Alchemist. Does it matter? Does it really matter? Does it distract? Does it detract? And then the question is if that little element doesn't detract from Full Metal Alchemist, why does the lolly fan service in Monogatari detract to the extent he is making it out to be?
You could say the
kind of what
quantity
I'd
of
wanna
it.
know. You could. That is valid, right?
I don't know. Do you know how many people died in the totally not Middle Eastern country in Full Metal Alchemist? That's a pretty
Yeah,
Oh, don't worry.
in the- yeah.
Don't worry. We're gonna get there.
Well, yeah, because that's the
We're gonna
whole
get
thing
there in a
about
minute.
like the Ishvalians is that the show doesn't necessarily frame them as. Let me put it to you this way: I don't see the Ishvalians as villains or the antagonist like in this fictional country. They are people that are, they're subjects of something. So as you go through the entire story of Full Metal Alchemist, you're like, oh, the military did all this bad stuff over in Ishval and they massacred a whole bunch of people, and they show the people who are responsible, and they show you that it's a bad thing that they wiped out all of these people. And then you see Scar and other Ishvalans that are still alive, and they're saying what exactly happened. And I don't know where he brought this whitewashing nonsense into it. I don't know if that's like supposed to be something important.
Well, he
But-
says it's from that conversation, and I don't remember that conversation. So.
I don't remember the conversation either, and again, it's
It
lacking
would have
the
been it would have helped his point if he actually showed a bit of the conversation, or at least
Yeah.
read out
Yeah,
a bit of the script or
That's
something.
that is a common issue with this video. Is a lot of the things he's talking about are lacking the proper context. Like, I agree, it would have actually strengthened his point if he had let the conversation play, and then he could talk about, right, this is why I view this as problematic, right?
This is
It's-
why I think this is a video not about convincing people, but reaffirming people who already agree
Yeah.
with this point.
It
Because
really comes off like that. Because I'm watching this and it's like I need this context. I need to know why are you thinking this? What is the problem here? I can't. If you're not going to show me the context, then you're not going to convince me. So anyway, let's continue.
you should
Media
already
serves a
know,
similar
otherwise
end
you're a
as
bad
pretending it's
person.
not there. It shuts down conversation while also ignoring the value it can have. By recognizing potentially harmful ideas in media, we refuse to accept them while opening a discussion on why that is. Cancel culture so often misses the mark on digging to the root of the problem and allowing opportunity for growth. Worth mentioning too, FMA also includes commentary on a number of topics that I think is spot on, like its handling of the Ishvalan genocide and the accountability of its heroes for their past crimes. Once we start canceling media for one thing we don't agree with, we might miss the value it holds elsewhere. Monogatari is a perfect example of that. A call for morally pure art is bound to yield a sanitized product. There's not some
Don't disagree.
I absolutely agree with that, actually.
I think the only thing I'm having is he's comparing Monogatari to the narrative that's in Full Metal Alchemist. I think that's my only issue.
I'm gonna be back in just a sec, so I'll let you guys discuss for a little bit.
Yeah, that's a point, a decent point. That one is more of a comedy show where it explores characters and their thoughts and ideas, where Full Metal Alchemist is really a not commentary is a way too heavy a word for this, but it has a story with about the world and how they live. And I think it's fair to have different expectations. If one is more of a fun, referential comedy story, and another is a story about a world with a little bit of magic and some heavy stuff, then yeah, the story with some heavy stuff is you should take more seriously than a story with of comedy.
I have returned. Yeah, so yeah, on that point there that he just made, I fully agree, because the idea, wanting a morally sanitized medium is just no. That's not what we should be striving for. We should not be, because I always hate the idea of limiters on art. I think that art should have the ability to be free to explore whatever avenues or ideas it sees fit, regardless of how detestable or horrible they are. And rather than look at it through the lens of, well, this is horrible. We should look at, okay, how does it execute this idea, right? Yes, the idea is horrible and detestable and terrible and whatever, but does it actually execute that idea in a meaningful or, successful manner, I guess?
Yeah.
All right.
Um,
I'll let you go.
I was gonna say something that has completely slipped my mind now.
Let's continue.
Some universal moral code. There is a lot of gray area with some things. So the only way people will create fiction devoid of anything someone finds
that was it. That was it.
Oh, yeah.
No, okay, so I do really hate the idea that his entire premise on this is that because people don't question objectionable aspects of something, they automatically accept them. I do not see that as something that is at all true. Like, I don't see that as a black and white thing.
Again, he's not a mind reader, right? You can't.
I mean, clearly he is.
I know, that's why I made the video. Come on.
But no, that's the thing. He's not a mind reader. You can't tell what people are thinking, right? You can't, like, if someone watches something, especially considering the fact he's not going to be in the room with them, right? He doesn't know if people are not, thinking critically about it, or if, having it dwell with them, or, oh, was this okay? Was this not okay? Such and such and such and such, right? Like, he doesn't know if people are engaging in media in the way that he's wanting or not. So, yeah, it's very, it's very weird. Let's continue. We're almost there.
Problematic is if we completely avoid such topics at all. A total refusal to examine or challenge the status quo in a way that helps nobody and is itself, well, problematic. And here's the thing. It's okay to love media considered problematic. I sure do. The entry point for this video, Monogatari, is problematic as hell, and it's in my top 10 favorite anime. Loving something doesn't mean you have to love everything about it, but it also isn't pretending its lesser elements don't exist. When we love a work, it means what we enjoy, what we connect with, what we put value in, outweighs the flaws. Recognizing the flaws of your favorite works isn't a signal you love them any less. It can both reinforce what you do connect with and wish to celebrate, while also understanding the full picture it presents and accepting that. See it as it is, not what you want it to be. But what
But, yeah.
No,
Look, I'm not an analyst, so this all just completely goes over my head.
None of us are. So
I think okay. So I've only ever analyzed things in book reports, but I'm pretty sure I will actually go as far as to say I'm pretty sure I could analyze something better than him. just from this point.
Boy.
Yeah, I'm gonna big talk figure.
But yeah, I don't necessarily disagree with what he's saying here, I guess. The idea of,
Well, here, I got something for you, Netsu. I got something for you.
Oh, yeah.
So let me go ahead and tell you, my favorite show is Symphogear. Now, if I recommend you watch Symphogear, I could say Symphogear is great, but it's a little problematic because people die a lot. And then that would be it. So if you're not okay with, people getting murdered in a concert, despite you yourself having been to a concert and being safe, that would be problematic for you.
Right.
So, I mean, I guess I get what he's saying. Like you're like, okay, well, he's making a point that's pretty valid because you can love something and criticize it too. But
in fact, we tend to criticize the things we love the most, right? Because we want them to be better.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I could say that like all of Symphogear this last season was just like this weird Deus Ex Machina every single episode, and I said, yeah, that's kind of boring. So when we get down to what we can criticize, I guess I don't know. I'm not analytic. If I don't like something, then I won't watch it. I don't know.
I think you misunderstood the context of problematic a little bit, because it's not problematic as in it might recall bad experiences or make contextualize a previous experience as negative. It's really
Let me put it this way, Ellie. If I can I interrupt you, Ellie? I'm sorry. I'm sorry, but I actually do need to interrupt you. So example.
I'm gonna let you finish. But
the concert example, okay? Because I've watched at least the first season of Symphogear. All of that death that happens, they gloss the fuck over that to keep the pace up of the story. They don't dwell on it that much. By this guy's logic, it's problematic because it's never examines the after effects of a horrible massacre at a public event. And the focus of a series isn't going to necessarily be an individual tragedy or an individual bad element. It is unreasonable to assume that all media is going to carefully examine every single small bad element of it. And it's unreasonable to assume that every time somebody gets shot in a James Bond film, the audience is going to pause and be like, well, that man had a family. I wonder what the after effects of that is.
Yeah, exactly that.
That poor man that got eaten by the shark. Oh no.
Yeah, essentially.
Anyways, I interrupted you, Ellie, like a dick.
Yes, you did. But I want to say that I got some more time to think about it, so that's all's well. The more problematic in this video is more in the context of a personal behavioral change, possible behavioral change. So the concept of this might may make you feel a little bit more uncomfortable about concerts in the future. That isn't really the problematic of this video. The more problematic of this video is think of the environment of all the stuff you do when you go to a concert or something. But I noticed something about his video, and that's the only problematic that really exists in this context in the video is stuff that is personal. There's no bigger societal problematic content.
Yeah.
Like
it feels like it's more a personal preference problem than a problematic problem.
Like there's no war is bad, war is good, problematic. I mean that exists, of course. War is bad, but war is justified in certain examples, and you could say that the big military shooters or American big old military movies of America are problematic in the sense that America world police, America war is good, war is justified, killing is
gotta feed that war machine.
Yeah, all that stuff. But because that isn't really a behavioral problem or possible behavioral problem, it doesn't really seem like for this video that is problematic.
Yeah.
I mean, he would disagree, but in this video, promoting war isn't problematic.
Yeah, it's very weird.
Well, there was that one point of whitewashing and and colorblindness. That is a larger societal problem, but this video is almost exclusively focused on the individual.
And even then, with that whitewash / colorblind thing, that's a very very easy to disagree with that in terms of like how people view race and the direction that we should be taking in order to mitigate such racism.
Well, but it is a larger societal thing, so. But it's the only one so far in this video.
Right. So yeah, let's keep going. We're almost there. Let's see what his closing points are, and then we'll cap the video off.
If I don't want to engage with these perceived real-world implications, I just want to have a good time. That's fine, but bear in mind others may not have the same luxury. For them, these real-world implications could be a matter of safety. Don't derail these conversations when others have it. Let's sum it all up as clear.
Okay, before he does his closing statement, actually very useful that he has those little things flash up. To be honest, it's good. It's good to know when he's making his points. Again, that it's like I just said. It feels like this is more of a personal issue, right? Because he's talking about like, okay, well, if you might not have the problem, but someone else might have a problem, and it might be a matter of safety somehow.
But because
which is
why
a
is it
weird
safety?
point. Which is a weird point to make because the entirety of this video has been about media influence, and now he's talking about personal safety. Like it's very, like that's a very weird point to me that he's making about personal like safety, right?
I forgot.
Because that's a completely different thing to, well, the media might influence people to do things in real life. Like that now he's talking more about like a sort of a triggering type scenario where someone watches something and it causes them distress, right? Because of past experience, or maybe they just find blood or spiders or what something causes an issue, right? It feels really weird when he wasn't actually making that point initially to kind of just immediately shift into this personal issue kind of
What did
direction.
he say when all those traffic lights were on screen?
I can go back. Let me just
Will
click and drag
technology
a little bit. Okay.
Yeah,
That'll
sorry about
probably
that.
be far. That'll be far. Okay, so let's listen to
It
what he says.
is, not what you want it to be. But what if I don't want to engage with these perceived real-world implications? I just want to have a good time. That's fine, but bear in mind others may not have the same luxury. For them, these real-world implications could be a matter of safety.
Alright.
Don't derail these conversations when
So I'm a little bit confused because all he talked about are personal things and behavioral things, and your behavior might adopt some negative aspects. But I'm a little bit confused. Some people don't have the luxury? Does this apply to the people who are media savvy, media critical, and are forced to recognize all of these elements? Or are that the people
Yeah.
who are already negatively influenced or are suffering under a negative influence? So I'm a little bit
It's a-
confused on
Yeah,
who is suffering now.
Yeah, because I'm confused as well because I interpreted it as being people who have a negative reaction to viewing the media. So, like I mentioned before, like if you don't like spiders and all of a sudden the show shows you a bunch of spiders, that's going to be problematic for you because it's a bit distressing, right? In that sense, right? A very individual personal sense of problematic, right? But he's never been talking about that. He's been talking about societal influence.
The
and
art reflecting on the
how-
life that we're currently in.
Yeah, that kind of thing. He's not really talked a lot about this idea of personal issues in a particular medium. So I find it very weird and, like you said, very confusing that he's taken this hard right kind of turn into this direction.
It was a left
If
turn.
that's actually, or a left, or a left turn.
He's turning whatever way he wants at this point. Can I say to be completely just a little aggressive here? I shouldn't have to care about what everybody else wants to watch. Like if for example, if there is a show that is like heavy with the spiders or blood on one episode, and I'm like, oh, this episode's good, and then the other person's like, no, I don't know about that one. I'm like, that's not my problem to worry about. Like you said, he's arguing for personal things now instead of art reflecting real life.
He's also assuming that when people watch media, I'm interrupting again. Sorry, but I do that.
No. It's the delays. I'll go. I'll let you go after I finish.
Okay.
So, like it's like Ali said before. Like I'm confused because is he talking about that or is he talking about people who are already negatively influenced being, not having the luxury to be able to ignore it because they're already influenced, or is he talking about the people that can think critically about it as opposed to people who just sort of enjoy the shows and don't, engage with them in the same level as he does, right? Like, it's a very weird and confusing point, and he really needed to elaborate on what he's talking about here.
He is basically saying in a very convoluted way, not all media is for everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, let me put it this way. If I'm watching something with my grandmother, I'm probably not going to watch, like, something with a lot of nudity or a sex scene or something like that, because I know she might not like it or might find it objectionable. Everybody does this, and he's assuming that people don't.
I recommend Bacchanal.
Bacchanal.
You're gonna watch Boku no Pico with the grandparents.
Oh my god.
Easy mistake.
Oh,
What's
man.
that man doing with that boy? At least he's giving him ice cream. Oh no! Yeah,
The
I just can see that going
discussion
that way.
about Prisma Ilia.
Yeah. So I agree with that. I think that this is definitely like he's taken a very interesting like shift here, and it feels like, I don't know, he probably shouldn't have switched to, depending on what he actually meant, because again, there's a lot of confusion right now about what he actually was talking about. But if he was talking about personal issues, he should have probably made that a bit more clear throughout the video, as well as like maybe talk about both, because both could be an interesting topic. But yeah, it's weird. But let's cap it off. What's his final conclusion? I'm gonna put on my TF2 engineer's mask and say, how? How does it
Others
perpetuate?
Let's sum it
have
all up
questions.
as clearly as I possibly
Yeah,
can.
I'm
Humans
gonna-
are
I'm
flawed.
gonna
Media made by humans
that-
is
that
going
good
to
old
reflect
how
those
out.
flaws.
I
Liking
don't
flawed
know
media is not
how
a tacit
media
approval of
is
those
going
flaws.
to
However,
perpetuate
allowing them to go
it.
unchecked
Technically
perpetuates
bullying it,
them.
but it's fine.
Thus,
No,
we
I'm
need
right
to be
here. I'm
willing
still
to
there.
acknowledge
no,
the
I mean,
less
Ellie
rosy
should-
readings and
right.
implications of our
Because I
favorite
saw
media
Ellie
in order
leave
to
the,
responsibly
watch
engage
the-
with it and avoid these issues becoming normalized. This doesn't mean
yeah,
you
I
have to
don't- I
qualify
would like to
every
know
statement
how.
about a work
How-
with a list
how
of its
does
problematic
it
elements, but at least
perpetuate
don't
these
dismiss
ideas?
others
You
when they
haven't
offer such
properly
appraisal.
explained
Remember that a
the
critique of
context
thing you
for
like is not a
how
critique of
the
you,
things
and be comfortable with
affect the
others
way that
seeing
you
it
think.
differently.
It's
This-
kind of a
this is-
circular reasoning thing, because if something goes unchallenged, it perpetuates it. Well, how is it perpetuated? Well, it goes unchallenged.
And how does he know? And why? How does he know it's going unchallenged? Because I mean, every single fucking day I go on Twitter and I see people challenging this type of shit.
Oh, yeah,
Like, how
and-
does he? Like, how can you say?
It is an
How can you say?
everyday thing.
Yeah. Oh, the video.
Oh, that's a choice
That's a-
jump cut.
rip the channel.
No.
Rip.
Again.
By the way, I just want to point out that scene, that entire episode, it's not just a scene that takes place in the bath, it's an entire episode that takes in the bath, was probably the most, the kids say the phrase lit, so it was probably the most lit bath fan service episode I think I've ever seen, because they get into some pretty heavy discussion during that episode. You need to watch Bakemonogatari, Naretsu. You'd probably enjoy the hell out of it.
I probably would. I just don't know where to fucking start because there's
Well,
so many
just
fucking...
Bakemonogatari.
Do production order.
All right, I'll have
to say
I'll
that.
have- I'll have to look into it. But yeah. Again, we were just talking about earlier. If you dropped out there about he mentioned that not challenging the media causes it to be perpetuated, and my answer to that was basically how. And then also the idea of, this stuff is being challenged. Like, I go on Twitter and every single fucking day it's people bitching about anime titties or lolicon or fan service
or racism,
this-
like the Love
or
Lab
race-
thing.
Yeah, or racism or sexism or fucking whateverism, right? Like, every single day you have people constantly being critical about this stuff. And it's very public, and there is ongoing wars. I wouldn't even say it's discussion, it's just fucking war about
just
these
shit-slinging.
things. Yeah, pretty much. It's just like, I think the statement that these things are not, like the implication, because he didn't make the outright statement, right? But the implication that nobody is being critical of this stuff and it's being allowed to just sort of, if it did perpetuate, right? Because he didn't explain how it perpetuates it, but being allowed to perpetuate freely, it doesn't add up with reality. I'm sorry, mate. I'm sorry, Scott. But
yeah, Ellie actually mentioned this while you just like completely your internet shut out. But no, it's a circular reasoning thing. Like I just kind of dawned on me because okay, this thing isn't being challenged, so it's problematic. Well, why is it problematic? Well, it's not being challenged.
Yeah. It's
that's
really...
the reasoning behind it, and it's dumb. You're missing a step there.
I would really love to get this guy on the show to talk about this, because it would be very interesting.
Well, we don't have that much pull.
Yeah, no, we don't. But it's like, because I do think that this is a very interesting topic to talk about, and I think we'll get more into that when we kind of get into the conclusion of the video. But it's just the issue we have is that, again, it's like you said, it's just shit-flinging. We've got one side that just wants to fucking ban everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just get rid of it completely. And then you have, the other side that's obviously trying to fight that, and you can clearly tell which side I'm biased towards. But it's like, that's the real problem in my view. But yeah, let's see if we can get to the end, and then we'll do some closing statements.
I'm gonna keep loving Monogatari. Remember when this was a Monogatari video? I will continue doing deep dives and character analyses as I work my way through it. I'll also never begrudge someone for finding its grosser elements too great a barrier to get past. Hey, I hate that too.
Gross.
My relationship status with the series may be permanently stuck at complicated. And you know what? That's okay.
Just wait till it gets to- there we go. So, okay. Let's do some closing things.
I think I'm still more
guess-
confused than when we started, to be honest with you.
I agree with that sentiment. I guess I'll go first. In terms of the video itself, because I am typically the one to talk about the video production side of things and how a video looks and feels. Right, it's a good video. I think his editing is very solid. I think his design choices are very solid. I quite like the kind of quick flash sort of, this is the conclusion. This is me talking about this. This is pros, cons, right? Like, I quite like that visual tell to be able to know what he's actually talking about, right? I think that's quite good. However, his actual points, very lacking. I think the video lacks a shitload of context. He needed to contextualize a lot of what he was saying in order for it to make any measure of sense. He ends up kind of flopping around near the end there with, the direction he's going and what he's actually talking about. 1 minute he's talking about societal influence and cultural influence of the media on you, and then he's moving into more personal issue territory, which he didn't really touch on a whole lot within the video. It was primarily about how the media affects people, which that whole argument hinges on if you even believe it in the first place, right? And he didn't really make a compelling argument to me as to why I should believe that. Like, he didn't convince me. I think I agree with Lolly's assessment earlier on that this is a video that's designed more to reaffirm people who already agree with the stance, rather than a video to kind of convince people or kind of, I guess, spark that kind of debate / discussion. I do think that he is right about a few things in terms of, the problematic content shouldn't be shut down or censored or cancelled or whatnot, and that you can enjoy things even if you find them particularly problematic, right? There's a lot of cases of that. However, again, he doesn't explain what problematic even means to him, or how the media he's talking about, in particular Monogatari and the lolly, he doesn't explain why he finds that problematic. He's just saying that it's problematic, right? And it's all easy to go, oh, well, it should be painfully obvious why it's problematic. It's like, well, no, because you need to contextualize it for people that might not know, right? Like someone who's never watched Monogatari before, knows absolutely nothing about Monogatari, right? They'll have no idea. Like, is the character just a pervert? Is he like actually lusting after these kids, or such? That's why you have to put context where it matters. So I guess my closing assessment of the video is I think it is a good video, but I don't agree with him on his stances.
Yeah, that's fair. It's just pretty much everything that you said, but more of just the context part. Because as he's presenting it to just someone going into this video and the anime itself blind, he's saying, oh, well, this character lusts after children, or, without really coming outward and saying it, he's just saying it's problematic, the things that are in this show, but he's showing them visually what he finds to be the problematic part of it. So the main character being a pervert is pretty much what we've gotten from it, but there's no, I don't know, like you said, there's no context to it. There's no this character doesn't do these certain things, or he does these things and that's why it's problematic, but it's never explained.
And I think that's the big thing, is we're missing a lot of how and whys, right? How is this problematic? Why is this problematic? So on and so forth.
Is the way it's framed completely change it, and how are you supposed to frame it? Like,
yeah, it's like almost to me, like, this is just my take on it. I feel like if someone were wanting to see something about Monogatari at some point, and they wanted to use this video as, oh, I wonder what this is about, and I want to make sure that it's good before I watch it, he's already essentially poisoned the well. So now if I go to watch Monogatari, if I'm, thinking the same way he is, I could go, yeah, this is problematic. I see what he's saying. All right, I'm moving along. But because I have an open mind and I know what personally offends me or, is safe to me, then I'll just probably watch it and be like, huh, it's pretty good. And then I'll just go on my life playing Apex Legends or something.
It's that's kind of that's where I'm at too. So what do you reckon, Ali?
Yeah, the video is, for all its nice editing, it's a little bit unfocused, because indeed it switches it switches in the end from society as anime as a cultural power and as a thing that can change you. It suddenly switches over to it being a active threat to you, something that is a immediate harm to you, which is a really confusing change. And I miss the problematic of not just on the personal but on the society. Like I said before, the only place where it mentions it's where in Full Metal Alchemist. But what about other stuff? And all the he did a little bit of a highlight reel where he showed anime and what I assume are the problematic elements in each of those shows. It had Steins Gate, Dragon Maid. It had even had Made in Abyss. But those are all shows that are potentially, maybe not likely, harmful to an individual, but none of those are harmful to a society as a whole. None of them promote ideas that would affect a society. And if anything, I think that's a missed opportunity, because you could pull out plenty of things that would critique the society that blatantly say, "Oh, this is good. No, don't worry about it." And there are you could most of those you could go, well, no, this bit of isekais in general, they often go to a medieval type world and they say, "Oh, your silly ways. Just use my liberal Japanese ways. Those are better." "Oh yes, your ways are so much better. I'll adopt them immediately." Which is a little bit of imperialistic, cultural hegemonic, blah 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 blah, fancy words.
Such and such, yeah.
Yeah. So my the video itself is fine, a little bit confusing, a little bit of missed opportunity. I really miss the societal part of problematic. I kind of want it.
Right. Now, I will say that this was a very good video to cover, and I very much enjoyed covering this video.
Oh, yeah,
because
no.
it's super fucking refreshing to cover a video where it's not just us screaming at someone about how wrong they are for 2 hours.
I must
It's
have
not-
missed something with this whole anime Matt
Oh, don't
nonsense.
worry.
Apparently I need to
Don't worry.
witness that again. So
Don't worry.
Just look at the
Necro.
Tanya the Evil videos. Just
Yeah,
like,
we'll get you on.
goddamn.
We'll get you on for a Man Anime Matt video one day because you will have a fucking blast. Because
Oh.
Jesus Christ.
oh
but
boy.
what I'm saying is it's refreshing to have a video that even though we disagree on it and we don't agree with him, it's not that he's like
He's
wrong.
not stupid. He's not stupid at all.
Yeah, he's not. He's definitely intelligent, and he's presenting it in a very informed and eloquent way. That's not, horrifically terrible. And it's clear that he put some work into it, right? Like, it's a good.
Mhm.
That's what I mean. It's a good video, even if we disagree. And it was a fucking joy to actually cover this and have this discussion. I think it's been a really fruitful discussion, and yeah, just really fantastic. I'm actually very, very happy with how this has turned out. So
No,
yeah, thanks under the
unfortunately-
scope.
I know.
Unfortunately, he didn't answer the most important question.
Are
Who's the
crabs
best
gay?
girl in Monogatari? No. We're already past that. We're not going back to the trap question. Who's the best girl in Monogatari? That's the important question.
Well, he answered that in the comments I saw.
Oh, did he?
Oh,
Oh, what was his
was it
what was his
Snail?
answer?
He very much likes Shinobu.
Oh, okay. Oh, so this entire thing is just him realizing he has an awkward boner for Shinobu. I understand. Shinobu is in fact the best character, in my opinion, as well.